baba long time no see. Koramal makatotang al diakper radio ni of Island. Nara Germany koram nara urior gidela plastics. Edi imol word ak remembering ira Germany. Prost. That's cheers. Selvaluar ata di malimaro marapit kaltay mamandita sa kita remembering. Anyway, bata ang mal makatotang agas tergita ngatia ngatira kalkora mal makatotal kate kalbeldum. Endi era bok introducer tira kalges tergita medio kum tergita totar sa susergid. Me do susray bedul lama raklay marubugul belau. Marbek karubugul laigal al 16 state. Ma bilung ma ibiraklay mar masil belau. President Surang Whips Jr., ma Vice President Arnold Oilo, mar Minister Sertir, Player Olvira Kalulaw, Senate President Paules, marugod Senator, ma House of Delegates, Speaker Kanay, marugod Delegates. Tirakal Player Kalkalira, Chief Justice, Ngiray Galaw, marugod Judges, and of course, Tirigant Mal Partners, Palau Conservation Society, Chairman's Governors Association. So Chairman Governor Henaro Paloy, Marugul Governors. Ungit tutan morar bekla ataloreng se tubetsel lungil welcome back to school and morarangal kara school. Ma good luck martirigan mo start ta school. Ilal tutaw ya kadang artial labantirira terul gestrigit. Goram total dia vekto matirka matadire kal am total dia kamreng so torangarir or mesam darir. Tirilel terul gestergit el alsit sa gestergit el lara obis Office of Climate Change. Tial obis rigit bela ulngi amru laurior girel tokoira climate change. Alle kora di duli segi de vaksal mo gumagay en masader tial obisek mo ngarang mru letir gagi tangartiang al gora o aisa gora telel tial obis rigi de megede guk tangarar adaringi ngaranga luriora longot mokla hindi tik introducer tirgal gestergi ngaringi Erbai lobenget madirek ngaringi Charlene. Mabaik mo ko yung sa Erbai melgora introduce yourself a bit more Erbai kasi ka Erbai taang ngara lemertial officer climate change and kaman mo total ngar officer climate change so yeah, how long has it been ngara gora direction retial officer mira climate change
yeah damam sulang retial there. Well, just to start off, obviously climate change Srakot le start them the partara OERC, Office of Environmental Response and Coordination, back in 2013. Yeah, ngar al segi the lobby segi the tama environmental planning was one part of the division, and then the other division was climate change coordination. And in 2015, our government saw that they needed to be their own entities. Obviously, climate change became its own office. A mandate maldi focus ra igele role gile la addressing ra impacts ra climate change. Maigele emission reduction emission reduction ay gidele maknit at ya tungur belang gigale atra mlay wa earth mabilas ma umales how do we reduce that? And I can get into that more later. It was backed by the first development Palau climate change policy that established that office also through an executive order.
Continue Erbai sa babilang tirigel or award Loreng sel amoderal sal understand the term climate change SM الغرة هذه المدة
smoothie.
سموديك مغرب القلت ديال تقوي climate change.
Yeah, sure. Climate change, it's yung wal uula blul ada dimral mum kayaldo. Ya egel kosra blul ada mum kayaldo. Ay gigidale maknital at. Egale atel that comes from oil and gas, ma coal. El البك البلو الآذا بلك البلو را بلو الآذا أو سبيل هاي
نمغرة
قال
دينجيل
دينكي ما ملاي ما
إسي.
أورورتا قال manufacturing plants. So it's vitally important to have this source of fuel. Di قال أتل توب one way to think about it ng wabar. It's like a blanket.
ملقيتها.
Oy, rablul adma sil keldela sil se sil belsoyes bo en wal lo lenget teringi dagat top tay ga
نلوت
gidele
التوب تتيت ليالت
why say
من سيل دبا بيواي وذا مغرسة ما ذا لول يابرو ذا غدا مال مغيال تتيا بار التيق البولتيبوس مغدا
dagal
دي
bol di bus
مغيال دي مغيال ذا.
di mayal el mutel every time el motto ay makitalat hindi wa mutel ngwa another el
الموت
broom
ترى بار نقول
oy
اليارجيد.
why say
I see.
exactly
So seguida la seguida el molgoid was an impact the climate change تل obisrami wa orior el girel la yelle تقوم من قدم المول من دي مغيال دي مغيال اما el تل كركريل تل بار
oy
en نيجل كده مو ofil الغورة affect تاجيدا تم قدونيك مو climate
oy
change.
One, one way to think about it, diwa batangid is silbo the sere mom gayal na batangid. And then there's different symptoms that affect your
Ngobangela
body.
madinga badangem,
Oh, sige.
ngobangela kluk,
I say,
ngobangela usngos.
I say,
So igegi the gora symptoms ra climate change, igegi the igel impact the both field.
I say,
Wa igegi the typhoon natara symptom ra climate change.
oy,
Ngora was ngasnge the said the sera tretara.
oy.
Jamalungil el comparison.
Es el bol magayal da habalu. En adab direct mom gayal mong expand adab melta gigidele aisra North Pole ma South Pole ma adaba dimral me masara balu gimla mesa evidence ay gigidel occurrences ma dungura ay gali coral reef there's instances ng mga bleaching ma ay gali palachika watu na fisheries sebol mga data
Amazing.
amazing so they're going east
So alam galgol
so ila mga talda
So segi del obisera climate change waigel di lunga Erbai amaru like agi the lurior gor omesa tegi nga the ela el tela blula the matele tele el guk symptoms ringis el the feel el tela belau
I see
and then ang aring sel direct matlo tubet sul word the ringi the tegi the lurior at adaptation. La Erbai numalgora emission reduction ese rukset klo will word the se mitigation.
yeah
Ruk togora mitigation el se magrado lang ayasaga. Ese ruk tomda so togora adaptation el ruk kwase magrada adjust. So set rumeng maramang aseselyol tenga kak makarang mosel ba akla. Ege gida get malwater stalurier loru dar adara obisa climate change. Itiamal makatatangal al open al obis kautia diluk maseng ulmul lara obisra OERC and then after obis OERC gomno patulke kami atira kalmera number tege kala al sela government other office of climate change
Sige del tama. Charlene nabay mleo ngara.
Leongarar o ERC.
Sira la split nga kamura climate change nga amlo environmental planner. So it's coming first soko. Maging nalmutal mara usisil obis.
Ilakom lar OERC, which was under the president.
Why say?
Ilang di directly under the president of Israel climate change.
Why say? But before that, tigim na Ministry of Finance. Uligim lemu mo nga mligira milmura ministry that deals with all the different ministries. That's one it too because ngarangia although taranges ul mesoisable to the government mura ay gali various organizations communities support giwal nga sila kwa conduit the coordinate.
Mr. Omuban Mura Finance Romne remain al Gura coordinating body.
Still,
so that's Gura ngul morsel el kor ul mesengi rata notes el wase amal clo to talil lurior tel obisra climate change at Gura coordination ma partnership collaboration. So maybe that's a good segue. Introduce rangal el tara gestergidar el altutawal el Charlene who kagit Erbai el dilud maseng mlara OERC mlara coordinating level in the environmental planner emle malamol mura Ministry of Finance direk el lu watang al marmar office ra climate change el still en arsegi de gora reyor gire la coordination nama planning so kuko pero Charlene magukol introduce ringi Mr. Kukora role ringi the office of the climate change.
Okay. So lang Heather, maybe and so I'll introduce rangal touching on the earlier question was ngaranga ruler OCC Office of Climate Change. Adding on to what Erbai mentioned, say the one of our ruler officer I would say quite a unique nature of climate change office is in Segi the work international space, my regional space, as well as the national and local space specific to climate change issues. So the milsta the issues are prevention, mitigation, adaptation, of course disaster reduction in the thematic component, and then there's an emerging loss and damage. Of course, the government and the obese position to quickly adapt. The issues on the ground, but oftentimes the causes of these problems are outside, and therefore we need sort of representatives or hopefully coordinators in a sense that it's very to work around these spaces at multi-levels. So in that sort of context, the Charlene Mersai. My current title is climate change, and it's kind of a temporary as we're kind of figuring out structure my role Office of Climate Change with these emerging threats. My current title is Integrated Climate and Development Programs Manager. This is a title that emphasizes in uniquely. We are trying to find a parking space for pre-committed projects or pre-committed initiatives. Also, agim nga budget and planning, agim le start. Change our priorities. We lost a lot of government employees around COVID time, and it takes so long to develop grants, approval, even to implementation. So during that time, there were so many changes in our government, and because of the work that I did, oftentimes it involved a coordination at underground as well as international. Quorum lumatigal nga malamul magal coordination. Le budget and planning we were really focusing on the budget, the annual budget, with very few staff. At shifted more say, which was still very much needed. Ndim nakangod al mangot al office handle like earlier commitments.
I see.
So I looked around the Emerald Digital Office of Climate Change ako positioned, even though it was not designed to implement projects. And so fortunately, both my current, my former supervisor, the Director Udoy, Budget and Planning, they understand that overall needs are ROP. Yes, we need staff with short-term budget planning. We also need staff or Mr. long-term coordination opportunities. So with both their supporting in my Erbai, basically bringing in 3 specific programs that I was leading at the time. One was a GCF funded global GCF global finance
Climate
climate
GCF Global Climate Fund.
Yeah.
global climate fund.
yeah.
That's climate country program. The second initiative is basically SDG reporting again. Sa direkal mal involve ko hindi ka dedicated office gora matbok ringi. Budget and planning served as the secretary to working with agencies and information to produce reports that we call VNRs, voluntary national reviews. We're still working on finding or a structural setup for that work. Then the last one is a big grant that Bella Amle receiving it under Jeff. Now that's Global Environment Facility.
I see.
And this is the Jeff 8 Blue Green Islands focusing on food systems. So I get the 3 initiatives that start the ROP with multiple stakeholders on the ground and more global team. Where blow time ma-attention ng moringi while we focus on the immediate short-term priorities. Now that akmlam sa bring them in Mira Office of Climate Change, and then implementing especially the climate finance work. Akmla ko discovered was that this is a specific area that Office of Climate Change adimlagal set up to
do.
prioritize when we were thinking of maral areas about to focus on, which are mitigation, adaptation, and disaster. Climate finance was always kind of in that space, but in our work at Office of Climate Change, primarily a lot of attention on our global arena when we're at the COPs and negotiate. Or sumang merbe allow underground benefits, it's through grants. Sige di ako ramle traditional process kita other allowed the way climate change was operating. Now that we're doing this work, na mo realize it was that in addition to that traditional space, we should have been prepared to always go out quickly, bring in the opportunities that are outside Elmira underground with climate finance. That beyond just adaptation and mitigation. And so sige di ako really immediate short term is really finding out to say the business structure climate change office to make sure coordination information the channel mera underground. Yeah.
So the climate change and climate change impacts and it's a lot. Mal botol as small islands in Miguel Below, the mal feel that mal clo will impact the climate change. And as Erbai mentioned that earlier, a lot of it dakal kita ko seringi kita dakal factory and dakal to lula botol oil ma botol coal mga rangklen hindi kita Miguel Below ablo mo feel say kita المسيسي اليول تن مسيسي القمتم تن تل sea level rise. And so kita Charlene ramsada kita international space kita baby ratara lorula obisa climate change lol ultra shasing mablu other mula sigamam deka mal emissions sigamam المرتيال global mal migigare footprint tergamam utilo amam mertial issue amal tlo watalamal mirgamam so tirgay ablool mengitakla albule de mengitakla ongti ten moraigal patokon maklol balu mal mering alurior gida gora di ngartial el ang temela el niño mo gora di taswa kam timte taswa seseliol tama adigo nomregal namut 2 times el panda typhoon ra sa ibala makwam el man mikme dergit So kadamadangit mula say the weather is changing, and climate is changing. Climate change is real. Emal potto koluryo rakat magil katanamo mention na to mitigation na to adaptation. Charlene na kuplat mo nga say disaster reduction, loss and damage. And then kadadong kartyan nga nga Erbai nga Charlene. Mattel obis ang mga raklungel obis and maltlo wa relel. Tangara direk kalorier tel obis el qura ol nga sewel el nagida Erbai el qura namom Erbai tukur omisa siya singalingi ol nga ra international space and mga adura a global community. And then ang gaya Charlene misada igal tablo kalden maklod project lulaban misoy sa bertial obis ra climate change. So there's a lot to be done. Kung ang mga raklungel tial obis and brulay kan mal maklolurior, iba to lurior.
Sila smoothie ilang structurally wal nga kamacho acho wal deputy we help the overall coordination I get a whole mandate what sits underneath ang PPMU project programs management unit to which Charlene is the head tying all of these funding sources figuring out ways to mainstream and implement them on the ground ngarangi di lub Hideos sige the Green Climate Fund sa niya Charlene we now have a liaison officer and the idea strengthen or sige the bridge ra GCF fund Green Climate Fund el mirablu belau the idea is to enhance the effectiveness ra get project and misois ba gore ngarangi two other well there's several but within the team ngarangi sila mitigation sila mo sa dangil reduce sa emissions that's very technical work mesra emission profiler belau gather data maski da baseline ra gigi the emissions profile ma actions will reduce ma reporting everything that we do in Palau we're also mandated to report to the international community maski da siya wasing mga ra nexus ra climate change mablu belau for us but also for the international community so that's the national reporting side direct then you have the adaptation team Teteru ngale Toni Soalablai mangale Cecilia it was actually because of the UN climate change discussions she was a youth negotiator and it was to that relationship she was willing to move from Argentina to support adaptation work and so altogether we're about 8 and we're still trying to bring in more
I see.
But the idea is to but the idea is to do as much as we can with the number of people. So the idea is not for us to shoulder all of the work, but to coordinate it.
I see.
Ma sira gidi gamle atap tali latest climate change policy ra blue belau. Yeah, one ra mandate mainstream gigidele priorities through the various ministries. So there's ongoing work to integrate climate change priorities into the national budgetary process.
I see.
So we leave it to the experts within those ministries to do the work, but then we support the linkage ra climate change to the work that they do.
I see. Papa kulbesara earlier maloko masetsu mo nga listeners ego nga karil mal klot topic at climate change bato ka ko rara reng at kirel tigil ko ati kararang rira sabari ko lan me ogera questions and more tirigal gesterigi natida kada di open line malmol maal atu hindi nga ni sil imol tokol dili Erbai Ma Charlene nalakal within dili mainstream. Mainstream sel twadungi lomda suringi tiada katokor bela wal sabeda ngul translate ringi. Di bodungi lomda suringi katokor oma ka aurior. Instead of oma ka dalawil, katokor oma ka aurior. Atokoy ra climate change morut abek kalbadengel aurior. Moramut aurior public health, moramut aurior anemo, remut aurior environment. Australia na mention food security. Tokoy ra agriculture mendiri kalngaringi. Moramut abek padengel kakaros lurior, kakaros el-adam akumbali ma government. Mang tsegi del tokoy en mainstream se makarado maka or makarado tolisi aureled. Instead nga kangartiam rura gururingi ya kawangartilang emrur omoruringi al mokme de diosisi ulurior yang makarang abay potata kalteru nge the CCE aureled el moklo silokora good impact sel kitas edan mesang lungil el radeel aureled. So mainstreaming amal klo el lurior el gira arogul adamru laigel oruringi el adakapotol aswar el mulwase. Tel gururingi PCS adirek kalmorut i aurior lorut ringi Erbai. Mang sab edan motma gesmisi isa kita lurior. Mang matlo tutale la tokora mainstreaming. Gagit Erbai not masetta di 8 el adang artel obise maralu lisara toga issues tokora climate change. Ya Charlene namnot mulwase ngania international space balul adarogir omda suringi ngania regional balura Pacifica ukti mesada ngania national balura bela wa ukti mesada. So ngakaros levels adorio ringi ebek padengela topic. So mutan mos misi isegi the lurior togoira collaboration ma partnership coordination man maklo tutal lurior. Our listeners al akman na mo understand there's togoira partnership le set talk me ak me loventri ar guest kar adal lurior el mga mokra imo lurior leto environment sector mang kada blool daktakar ate mrura imolurior di el environment sectoring di kalsal global issue mal global white global el toira climate change so ta eitel ade olong song sa imori ramal sumang kora sub amit supporter in some way raim Anding ngaringa gigit el baby raurier obisra climate change el tira kamalos pe anges ura atrablu. Sel baby le nga kamal mga tatal courier environment sector anding dia ka to tengi aro kultoy kada orier etset bela kada to the mora region mora pacific to the mora global ending ngaringi sel knowledge sel luldas o malubeng en togoy el kawasilubi el kita de gato tangali el klo tutalel sel knowledge el armoklo el ad el tegal ukraba biyer ma ategal losa teringin morata matang aige ya tirakon moklo tutalel el boto tengileng ngara igel experiences sergi tatiang at el telablul adarang aramon mir el ang asab elo oti ang armadadal time. So igel cook experience rengel ruba ngel ngal ngarang klel el nga gadim nabak experience ringi al asab el mo o inform marawrior nga kamaruringi. So kodine swal duli segi teleng ngaringi selvan aurior Officer Climate Change dirakal kikarelurior the National Adaptation Plan. El ngi what yagi the dili wasing riko ngora ngurior belu National Adaptation Plan now real blue with regards to the obvious climate change amudong okli gut makli. Nzem lugoras modi segi the nap Erbai maseseng ngarangi ngaratora sabadi expectar adara blue.
Oh, I see.
Immarok to telel and mortir.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But to understand where the NAF fits, and maybe I can make a bigger picture.
Oo.
La ngani segi dele sile Palau climate change policy at it's a national policy. El mosquit sile shasing el overall impact el mara blue belau. May gile priorities el gidel gut mokol address ra gidel impact. Din close shasing. National Adaptation Plan ang usirkul shasing. Mesa se tel shasing how does it look ra al selablu ra orior? How does it look ra selablu ra malgayo? How does it look ra ayang ngaram lungoy plilio? Mung sea level rise. So, is there a difference between orior mamalgayo? Skum mga nga typhoon, does Melgayok gets more impacted compared to other state? Sa damal mom dali sige dala ko specific challenges posed
Per state.
per state at the state level. So you can then develop tailor the measures to address those unique challenges at the state level. Sige damal mokte kada National Adaptation Plan. And where the community comes in, ngarangi gidele science gim information walom subela ay kagidel belu. Gim collect maging samal assess, but at the same time gimwal gimospera input ra adra belu el wasetang mral ngindiak.
I see.
Is the science telling? Are you seeing what the scientific assessment is telling us? The calibrate to make sure was assessment accurate.
I see. So the raw example let's say sera typhoon bofa
Hoy,
el malne impact ikakitele hospital.
hoy,
So science adi lurgi the mulwase sera typhoon emne wangaranga klisi el tial typhoon emne wangaranga dol ersel time.
hoy,
And the science ada kalo oti mulwase tial ta bersera bel ngasara oleng mlogi relger.
hoy.
And there tegel baby let's adrablu wa contribute.
Exactly.
I say.
Hoy,
Sera la bel sisabada ben metela blu mlogi relger rablik ngarangi lain malmeral
hoy.
le set science adrablu oti say.
I say.
I say.
I say. May gigil wal missing information those spell to strengthen our gigil our understanding our gal impact. Goreng wal drekal adra blo wasi bista gidal impact ay gida igel giram el gutmokla miskum mut mga typhoon el white yang indakal matamal adra blo.
It's adaptation.
That's the adaptation.
I say.
And it's going to be unique from one state to the next. There's going to be similarities, but there's going to be also unique ones. Isegi damal mokte kada National Adaptation Plan. That's one component. The other component, silbo dangali gigidele priorities from the assessment. L'adra blo se pistra gagidel challenges, agagidel gel mokotmok. Magigidel listra gel mokotmok. And then start applying for a second round, what is called NAP implementation. It's looking for funding support from Green Climate Fund and others. Gimla identify the priority areas. We need support to address the priorities. And that's where down the line, we will see some hopefully get that support that's needed.
And then it comes kukmuringi segidel imol big word that toira climate change the build a resilience.
Building resilience.
Yeah. Resilience at the المقلو الwords الثياقة مال لويذل التغر بلا والتسب إن موغيت ميسي إي سلوريو سل وورد دي أيغاقي دلوريو راتغوير adaptation make sure يغضا ngani se nanya wana translation ngi kiring si wase ndia kada masmasim kada masisi
What you say?
so adaptation kada help perigi del build our resilience masela boringi ya wai kai del el maklolyolt kada masisi ngani se mutawana togoilo loringi we can bounce back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What you say?
So selame lutat ma bofa el tuava ben merablura melgayo إغاظة سلفا أقل غني قايدة adaptation measures الجيد إسلريد إنت بإذ اللموت الكامباك إذن أقلي إونيل غني غليذ غني مليذ سلفا
What you say?
so resilience سلوانا طريقة كلول word التغير climate change يا قايدة روانا بمقلوب تتليل make sure إن سبئذ stay resilient
What you say?
Yeah, mal batog al maklo lurior. Nganya imong al no dekadarati mal suwakan mo tuli. Le sera July 26 ingi le World Mangrove Day.
Oh.
World Mangrove Day agora celebration ra globally ra blula adarogi el kukora omes ra atogoira kabur suk masayka maklo tutilin merigid. Seldom das fatogora kaburs egal namomiragal omsuba kaburs el tangaringi gatawas ngol nga sergi darayol taselam sesayol teng protector gid elangi gala endi ngari selwana raurior togoira climate change dirakat matlog tutelen seldosa togoira mitigation kada masadok masing magarang adol ngaya sa kaigal makita laat mora ablulat di aparter sea direklase magarang ado sikrole la store or rega tay kagitan makita laat mandakal lolomol malamal larigid so the other big terms the climate change so big terms the other big term mara climate change sel carbon sequestration alngi malplo au tutelele wana dirakat malplo lurior loruringia obisra climate change o Mr. Say nasa melora touch on what that means
Yeah, sure.
and nogasabadira ar adan mo understand ek mase akabur sa dil protector ga rayol tamadakadilom elangi kalan dirakat malplo tutelele ratogora climate change.
Yeah. Do you want to take a stab?
I'm sure I can.
Yeah.
Take. I think for me, Heather, to respond the Girela Mangrove, ask a question again. I'm thinking ngarang a best way to talk about mangroves as a habitat in relation to climate change. And I want to say mangroves a while batoka madal. Batoka faces sergi la dungura mitigation space global positive. We need not just mangroves makaragar to help trap by gagid maknitalat. So big picture mitigation positive. Dira kasi adolames mangrove in another facet del adaptation space. Gagid kadamil sa da typhoon ma storms sa so mga rin intact healthy mangrove madalabalu and minimize the surge. So mitigation and adaptation. Now, silver touching Erbai localized intervention or adaptation. What the libre sa I would say perception or other bela or gira la the face or mangrove at the local level. I've heard talk other bela or said nga conference that was say kung di protect a mangrove hindi ka mamagi makara. You know, we need access, we need land, we need housing. Egal mangrove makara. So it's I would say ang girel obis climate change ma partners to understand locally wasi. So those are the mangrove protection. Even let's say Malakayok. Malakayok nga East Coast hindi kasabi restore mangrove habitats. Asuko mang na research ak mundi kasabi. Then how can we take advantage of that coastal area and still minimize surge? Masuko makadam as a nation, national level, mga dudu rakakaro sa states identify kasi state raman kayo na nuplatak alwasing hindi kasabi restore mangrove. And then the national government always climate change. Ako mga datura maybe West Coast wasi take it a situation in the big picture overall babadab. How can malakayo let's say ngaram longoy share their respective resources, they benefit I get the international funds with the information mitigation adaptation, hopefully with access to funding. Mga niya get compromises that malakayo could make more compensated by ngaram longoy, and then they both can whatever experience they get their co-benefits. So ideal, I would say coordination where Office of Climate Change sits, and sabihin may get information, a channel a specific benefits or more sa pockets of the community, but that requires institutional setup, communication, and of course awareness. So maybe if I can just quickly go back to send the question on la staff for climate change office. One of the challenge that's often
Kaya nga caller pata.
Ngania caller makame mungutay kita kamente. Tuta caller.
Sorry Charlene, hada sa caller pata tim irtian moklong rin takrang si.
Ali caller malungil tutaw.
Mal repeat their same no dagid mrang si pata maseng ngaram ne question ringi.
Amle question range ya milsa talgire la ndimla kal question nga dimla comment. Talgire la igal bu mawatokor o malam.
Bu malama.
Lungutel alokong makaskali malamang kasaya abu ngarang klel ngarang affect ngitel.
Climate change ang affect bu production and
Yes.
say kita ko any comment on that Erbai?
I can try. Akumda social question actually mal relevant teling. One of those the lomal other bela o spell for practicing it but also livelihood. So just like any the lomala, asuko mo makita yang the mal strong asils or mal ulo matamala the lomal. Abu is one of those the lomal mo affected. Hindi unlike maybe udla matamala abu and matamala livelihood So back to question abu climate change. Unlike karwa, let's say ako kawal nga masay the level of threat del Morabu is not as urgent as a baby the lomal, the relied for livelihood, Arbelao. But that being the case, to the best of my knowledge, hindi was the extreme heat or extreme rain that we've had. La affect abu by diseases, pest which may or may not be climate related or both, and we don't have the specific research on that.
I see.
Tadire kalwan comment lamel kira la takuk masada tokol aus. Aus. Oy, asum kamalmal telmalmal marande me maluluringi omri ringil mo aus ndire kal maral tamali.
I see. Adan marula aus tola ba label Miranda. Marula aus.
El akuk sal ko ngalili kira lang kel bitang. Akuk tamura alba abe me malamaranda. Me tmulal mo pas me remul mo aus.
Nding mle avang kal Miranda tungu avang tamalay kal namad Miranda. Nukurar wabada Miranda namad.
Nganya ang alsar kutingil kiril tirkal
Ay kita ngil kiril tapoto tingi.
Tirakal takmul wasing sumong mongo lungsong sal ikalulukawa ito la pa ikakita.
Ito mala adan Miranda.
Adan Miranda.
So malulal ausa Oy. I guess Erbai am nodulit mulwa se togoira climate change direk legal effect ringia include ngade ella tial dabet. So mom real da dabet mokloa asidringi sellabol magami mata bebol real den clote al mada maranda. Ani kagid el core bleaching atara roleleng mada ikan maranda. Ogoreng direk kaiga ulakwak. They're all connected. Mesel mada maranda eng mada ngigel I guess at the end of the road eng mada up. Sel mada maranda eng mada ngigel eng chen setial environmental et setial dab eng mogay makmada bekal badengel arm ma ngaren ngartial dab. Ngaringi sel imol sobel lo subering ngar school lo se food web arogul togoy aguradi ngaringi la tel maranda leet el morangigel ya ngigel leet el moraklol ngigel ya ara leet el morangarang leet el morangarang esel matamala imong ing matamala sel leet enguk matamala imong. So igegi del connection sel dom taswiringi ra food web el va ser ndi connected ya telemel mrand asab el tomala mal batora etcetera garigir. So tsukum ngani impact ra climate change in sab el tomalia maranda egida direk el mei magadol da alaqrangal maranda en kodomoto mala igagi del environment delgida usperingin more resilient. Kat segi del war del tutsadringin masada resilient vasegada mo masisi edegada mas masim esabe del bounce back from impact moderal sabe del gut makli al tsugum mental malat yal garger. Mal tsugum mental mala garger moringi ya typhoon ya bol gugu gendegat edan mosmiga galedringi. Mogmang at el time el gire del mor sel guktara da rior el restoration momalal mamarand mom goro langigle goro lagi mangirogui. So ndi qatin esugal gamen tersegi and then pues tirirate al tirigal gukura musese el gire langi gidal. Gamen tenke color.
Oh, so I'll add on to what you just said ahead. الماسلتين الإرباي localized intervention adaptation. Tial example ra ausa diwa example ra claro dos perin matamala ra increasing heat or sea level rise. So dongo ra coral reef Palau as the header I'm mentioned maral it's threatened. Sea level rise but also increasing heat threaten ra klangara ikan maranda. So sel concept of resilient it kicks in alwase. How do we make sure other blue are resilient? By making sure our coral reef systems are resilient. Because already get external threats and heat increasing temperature already threatened regal maranda gid. So mo kada malmol malod alakle of course mo lose the resilience ringi. But I mentioned that primarily to segue to say the concept that NAP ideally is the understand that a threat. Ako dira can understand that ang kala community being threatened. So for example, sea level rise or let's say a typhoon. Threat that typhoon hindi impact rabo fal more East Coast, amne different impact rabo fal more West Coast. Mahayan, north, south. At the national level, NAP level, how would have Office of Climate Change or national government been as best prepared to help the coastal communities when that threat happens? It the liga example one great example. All we can do, obviously, climate change is hopefully disseminate the information. The decisions are blue. There's not much more we can do regarding Ausama coral reef, but we are in the position to get this information, so therefore we should disseminate. And then based on that, taktiswa kaldi highlight going back to obviously climate change. Sel dosa dara at climate change ma benefits me other blue, let's say adaptation. Girel mesisi a obis. Yeah, obviously climate change at that time masugumang 8 stuff. I think we might have more than 8, but asugumang 8. I know for a fact that the terur tiral 8 are paid by the national government. The rest are by grants, which means I got a short term, which means asugumar staff and relay grant that they'll deliver and stop a grant they'll
Yung
get paid.
modera.
And so, but we also need enough staff to help and make sure I grant that. And so we're kind of in a tough spot. And that's why I'm saying my role is temp. We're still trying to figure out the say, especially still make SL grant Jeff 8, the hire more people. How best can those Jeff 8
I see.
staff support the overall? So resilience, I would just like to close it with say, Palur Belau needs to be informed. And right now, obviously, climate change is designed to try to deliver on that. We have 8 staff, but we're going to be growing, and hopefully we will restructure. And especially our dependency on more grant, that's
I
not going to
see.
stop.
I see.
We need to increase our capacity to access and implement the grant. And Office of Climate Change, I'm going to start actively trying to figure out the best way to institutionalize that.
Da masadara rwa maranda resilience yakmo amdas versel at climate change hindi immediate climate change happening long term happen القماطة time قماطة سمير سلول Erbai Enga مقطوع ما يقول ترستال symptoms الغاول غاية طبطوبة ndi sella طبطة يقال symptoms en meral immediate Ketika belum sa total meral mering laptelum and it's the same thing ketika belum sa total yang masih sayol te digat emura school so I get impact ang clue science going on try understand again thing ngaring time hindi ka burul mo teka tasal kaltmok girel so kaya building resilience clue out to telel wase sella dil gabarul happen atroy en magarang sab eta dir gasel ba akla ya ko tulungil example say ya tia dim na climate change and dim ne gobid mandim lo gobid en sto baro gulti allen may igadanno magarang gadanno matidurur tan more gadam lo rage dem lo radab so at the end of the day etel environment trigida musob aklid maset sugumeng resilient tatel coral reef waisel dilia Charlene la closa dial elaboringa typhoon ya bolgu kan se emal mora karigere mitigara oti mem makasalba akla so I gave at the end of the day قضم das versus resiliency dar ad el kerti al balwad ma balwada resilient megitas even more resilient and yeah so it's all connected يجي الدول قلت مسيكا رغويا دي connected من دي قد سأدل ديوم تسوى دي adaptation دي قلقية دوم تسوى mitigation دي قلقية دوم تسوى disaster reduction ما يقال بك بدنجي لوريور لو بنترير بك بدنجي لرقاد اللي ايتل آتا دي قلقوت مقليتيا yeah it's big work so the goram no duli national adaptation plan nama kagita le Charlene goram no duli Jeff 8 el mermang al la food system ngara gora rior gat magiler el alraq or the immediate work kara officer climate change gora so mil gora share and mora adalo rings
Actually, I'm aware. Of course, you are aware. And then, albay liungile. Ek invite ratto nils modi kami Toni. Hindi, I'm putting her on the spot lang. But of course, I got really obvious ending there's focal points in Brand Brut and I think they're in the best position to talk
Yeah.
about it. Last MS Modi siligra at GCCM CRF.
Sembel qati me medira microphone.
Sulang
Iqadqor
Chinese.
umere qate me qadqor matigibeling alaqla. But this was the moment era dongo simil was ngarai ke le gora urior el raada mo expect obisa climate change in Meru el angal mo sometimes next year. Kapot Toni kamo isok mo ko Toni riger.
Malungil to tau Heather, Erbai, Charlene, rugul adalorengs, nga Toni Soalablai, yagudir opistigi de la climate change, nga tiel Timra National Adaptation Plan. As Erbai Charlene mentioned before, ang malgakara ya Timra opisa climate change masel lesab amamel gora motto de moregal community mo o yung mga adults adal kay gal bakpading la blue or the adal experience or tel impact la climate change en malblo plakal mo ge ko sa marial mo yung sertir mga adults tire mo dengan wase makarang ki mo nga sertir or gim kora nga sertir mga sadal sel burden ra everyday life or especially in the context of climate change. And so nga projects sa gimawdo rin ilaangan nala tanga partnership sa president mo sa climate change masel Global Center on Climate Mobility ay nga kwanta lang al mail mo pinpoint waseng ang ngara pasyo o ang project tas edel mut ekut mo kradi mare edel time takadadul wasa kadakora di slaprat pande either tel problem but kada makarang starter sel el foundation to makadora applying kada makara omu ler sel ulel omeser tel problem makara da solver nila di mered el time ang sabi ala adal experience tel el impact el nganya mered el benefit el moringi. And so kaya el project ang nga kalden merer ang nga wan el nga ngesaw little watershed el lobang kala Koror State Government, Koror State Youth Council, direk kal nga project ra ngor kabasang lobang kala legislator Reinhard Silas, madirek kal nga project nga lang ayang ang iga nga di mo address yourself issue ra adaptation ma climate mobility. So kadame sel Daksal madingel wase makarak explainer tel tokor belaw and ding word a concurrent mang marero OCC will time and then sel domester tel ender tel grant ngaram nos el makatmokle and then aigal outside source ang makarang may emutel alol nga sewer gid al nga positive impact or nga nya ngil kora amil katmokla sa legal project eng setra example el mora aldabe letter maas trubakal alo sers to masay or to o farmapu o or to marula au so se makaling kim support tegal to lorun mora livelihood tier. So for right now igagida project also mamal I'll share because ang maklo to telel mora maklo to telel mora obvious and thing amrangi kada alo message ay tigal adal experience igal impact la climate change makarada helper tir makarada make sure wase way gagidel al aluriol gi bomongat mokra outsider below into the international space ala conference of the parties or luriol bangala UN makaragi mga igay galudo del legal bek padengala maklol belua promise mo o funder gagi de lorula igaluriol lorula Charlene makarado la bagel mer below mang ngol nga sewer gi de rokui todo nga se pela mal gigare en so to me so bisa climate change en tiri gigare el team en ding mal boto maklowe en itol dorula.
I see. Manongil Toni gora mo sum up per sel gigare el office maklol toy dorul maklo swada maklor lungil rete elaurele den morar bekla. So kadokora over time among the climate change is a big issue. Malklo toya climate change is eden motong okle di masader ngital seeds deng mal patogara lel toya climate change. Yes, ang klo lurior e klo tutalel like I that partnership and collaboration that atalong lir arbekla adarogui ar adarablu ma bekpatengil agencies locally, regionally, ma internationally. So ngora tigia temete mendiswagal di maskamiwa a couple of minutes for any last words that you want to say. And most importantly at sumam na rin listener القوم لارنيا غريري غورا دي ملاقل سوال لو تنواي مورا اير انت بدي يقول obesity climate change يمد أدور other obese so everybody دي مؤتيها تنوارا obesity غميو المورا listeners say and then any last words before we officially close it radio kita ilang.
Oy, lading work mama 488 4410 that'll take you more seguido le mainland ra obisa president kung di request ra lan ra obisa climate change and
transfer ra kamin mo
mal it's a mal cover aklol area when it comes to climate change but the main thing is it's to support in mainstream efforts to enhance our livelihood that's one key and the other one is oil mal kaya contribution regidra le maknit el produce the idea abelaw is here provider segid symbol saying we're still doing what is necessary to demonstrate and lead by example. Say the solar panels that we're seeing being installed modernizing our grid system is part of that overall work. In a nutshell, it's those two things. How do we be part of the solution in principle and symbolically? And on the other hand, what can we do to make sure they're safe in the times of sisi elyolt malubong coral reef bleaching. How in the face of it and as Heather has mentioned be resilient, and everything else is in the details how we go about the segid el just to emphasize that it's through the partnerships, the networks and collaboration where we work together internationally and nationally where we can have greater impact than doing it individually on our own. Mangdim segid for other opportunities to have a next series we're very much happy to collaborate with PCS mara adrablu komal misulang ratial.
Dim nakakalas tatingin me Toni or Charlene? You're good?
Malmasulang.
No problem. May mal open environmental hour giril a next series of talk shows sa Officer Climate Change. Yat so may listeners ako rangaringi specific ilgora topic climate change so me will learn more about or reng sa giril and sa me will lamkadong or sil obisara sentilal number Erbai
488-4410
488-4410 el more obisa presidente transfer min more obisa climate change or in sa milo den one mera obisa PCS 488-3993 mabotong si mer edi umaklat karsel last taking el Erbai el dili. How do we be a part of the solution? So everybody has a part as individuals, as organizations, as the government. Ngaringi aurungar alit, ngaringi aurelit, and mom sab akarigid. At the end of the day, egid aswad and more resilient and mom sisi most of it bounce back. There are the masim regagid and magnit effects of climate change. Mang mosa be edel selva akla livelihood rigid. Gegi del dillo lo goringi tirgang el togoil dim nakabado sodi a livelihood. Livelihood set langa rigid al other be laura bekkal seeds. Kamagi o mongure moriore mereme mokmokrablim mar adrablim. Set langa ragar other be la magarada protectoringi. Egi the rogo yang aringa parterigid, mati the borsegid, ek osmeri Tokshorigi say let's do our part to help climate change and everything else. Say kita ko man masulang makuk next talk show.